In this video here, we're going to be taking a look at how do we plot points on a coordinate grid and what is a coordinate grid. Now, you may have done some grid work and some plotting points and graphing in previous grades, but we're going to go through again how to plot points on a coordinate grid, and we will talk about this in class as well. Now, a coordinate grid, okay, so a coordinate grid looks a little bit like this. It has two axes, okay? Two axes meaning it has two kind of lines that go through it. The horizontal axis, okay, horizontal means flat, straight, okay, represents the x value, or the independent variable, which we talked about in previous ones, and the vertical axis represents, as you might be able to assume, the y value, okay? So a coordinate grid is a way of graphing and plotting points which have an x and a y value. Now this is a 2D graph, so it's flat. Okay, we're not going to be taking a look at 3D graphs at this point here. We're just going to look at 2D ones. So we're looking at a flat graph which has two dimensions, a x and a y, and those are going to be the basics that we're going to take a look at in this lesson here. Now the position of the axis, okay, is going to be based on the values that are given. Okay, putting the lines in the middle of the graph is the most basic position that we could have. Okay, now if you just have positive numbers, you might want to put it on the left and the right, and we'll have positives in here. But in the right in the middle will give us positives and negatives, and we're going to definitely be dealing with negatives as well. It's the most basic because it does deal with positives, and negative, positive and negative values. And so it deals with positive and negative values. What that means is that we're going to take our vertical axis and we're going to put it right here. There we go. I maybe made it a hair long. That's okay. Just trying to be somewhat proactive, getting it on there ahead of time. And our horizontal axis, we're going to put right here. Okay. We'll do the vertical one over a little bit. Let's try to get one more centered. There we go. All right. So we have our horizontal and we have our vertical axis. Now, when we put those on there, we make sure that we label them as well. So over here, we're going to put a little x, because that is our x-axis. And up here, or on the bottom if you really want, we're going to put a little y. We usually put it up on the right and the top because that represents our positive values. The next thing that we're going to do when we have this is we are going to label our axes. Okay, so we're going to label them based on our grids. And so we're going to use we can label them kind of with whatever numbers we really want, okay? But we're going to label the axis so that each line is equal distance from each other line, okay? So every line is equal distance from each other line. Now it can be a difference of 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 100. Okay? When it comes to labeling our lines, it could really be any of those, but we are going to, but it has to be equal distance. Now, when I put mine in here, I'm going to be starting with 2 on the second line. Actually, you know what? Let's start with 1 here. I'm going to do it small enough. So that's 1. There's 2. Here's 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay. That's my positive values right there. Okay. So this point right here, the right inside point is 0. From there, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, normally on my graph, I will not do these exact, like I'll usually won't do every line. I'll usually kind of skip lines. I will do 2, 4, 6. That's if I'm writing it down by hand. It saves me from having to do extra numbers, and we know which is which. So why we're going to do the same thing. Okay, so that's 1. Actually, let's see if we can do this here. This will be actually 7. And 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then I'm just going to make these numbers actually a little bit smaller. We're going to try this out here, see if it works. No, not going to work. Okay, then we're going to have to do it slightly different. Okay, so we're going to start off making them, do this again here. It's a little bit more difficult on the computer as, you know, it's much easier doing it by hand. try this again here. Okay. Come on. Text box. That's what I'm wanting here. There's 2. Here's 3. Try to get that on there right away. And so on and so forth. Okay. So it's going to take a little bit of time. What I'm going to do, so 4, I'm just going to, and we're back. And you'll notice that I put in my 5, 6, and 7 there as well. So this again is 0. So we go up from the X line here. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Each of these lines has that value of Y. And on the positive side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Each of these lines here has that X value. Now, when we are doing this, we can also have negative values. Okay, and so negative numbers will be on the left and below. Put that in there. The axis lines. Okay, so this side here is going to be negatives, and we start with -1 all the way to -7, and then on the bottom we also start with -1 and go to -7. Okay, so I'm going to be putting those in, but I will pause the video so it's not taking up time, and we'll see where those end up. And we're back. You'll notice here that was, I know, really quick for you, but for me it took a little bit of time. Got all my numbers in here. I have the negatives from -1 to -7, -1 to -7. So this is how we label our axes. Okay. We need to do this every time. So every single time you draw a graph, or every time you put a graph together, you always have to label the axis. You have to put your numbers on there, whether it goes up from one at a time, or whether it goes up by 2s or 3s or 10s. Okay, we need to make sure that we put that on there, and we are describing it properly. Now we do this because to plot points on the grid, we need to know where those points go, and that's why we need to make sure that we label it directly. So to do that, we look at the table of values, and we catalog each line as a pair. Specifically, okay, we write it out like this, an X and then a Y. So when we do that here, okay, so you know that here we have the point, we have 2 and 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to catalog that as the point 2, 2. That's what we're going to catalog it. Okay, that's our point. And we can do that with every single one. So 4, -5, okay, will be written like that. -1, -3. And -3, 0. And then 0, -2. There we go, are going to be our points that we have. So we have those points. What we do is we catalog and we put the X value and then the Y value. And it's always in that order. It's always X, then Y. Okay, it's always our independent variable and then our dependent variable, or the values that we have for it. Now, to graph those out, we're going to take each of these points and we're going to find the location that it fits on the graph here. Okay, now I'm going to do this with a drawing tool to try to make it a little simpler. I'm going to use different color pie for each one. But when we are going to graph this out, what we're going to do is we're going to find the location of 2, 2. So for X, we have a +2. So +2 is right here. Okay, and so that would be, let me draw it out a little bit thicker actually. Okay, that'll be right here, this line right there. That's maybe a little bit too thick. Okay, let's make that a little bit thinner. Okay, this is our number 2 line right here. Okay, so we can think of this as being number 2 line, and then on the Y values right here, this is our number 2 line right here. Okay, so this is our number 2 line, and we want to find where they meet, and that is right here at the point 2, 2. And so we're going to label this as 2, 2. Hopefully that won't get in the way of some of the other ones that we're doing here. Okay, that's what that point is. That's how we label a point on a coordinate grid. The next one there, 4, -5, okay, is also going to be looking at a positive on the 4 side here. Okay, so positive on the X here is +4 right here. So that's this line right here. And then we're going to look at the -5 on the y. So instead of going up on the y, we go down to -5 right here. Okay, we find where those two lines meet, and that's right here. And then again, we label that as 4, -5. Okay, that's how we label it. It's 4, -5, and that would be the label on our graph. We can keep doing that. Okay, -1, -3 is our next point. So we go to -1 on the x side, so that's right here, and -3 on the y side, so that's this line right there, and we plot that point right there, and that'll be -1, -3. And now I'm trying to do it as neat as I can. When you're doing it yourself, make sure you label it with the coordinate point. Okay, we need to label it, so the dot and the address as well. If we want to call that an address, I like to describe this as these are streets and roads, streets and avenues, okay, where the X is our streets and the Y is our avenues, and we're looking for the intersection point of those, okay? Where are we meeting? This is the address that we are meeting at. -3, 0, -3 is right over here. This is our 0 line right there for Y, and so this would be the point right here at -3, 0. And finally, the very last one that we have here is at 0, -2. So this is our 0 line for X, and this is our, sorry, that's not 0. This is our 0 line for X. Get rid of that. This is our 0 line for X, and our -2 line is right there. And so this point right here is at 0, -2. Okay, and that would be plotting those points on a coordinate grid. Now you don't have to put these little lines in there to represent, but you need to find on the X, where is it, and on the Y, where is our point, and then line them up as such.